Alrighty. Hopefully this is working properly. Hi, my name is Jin. This is my first time live streaming with trying to do a demo on the code that I'm working on. So the main project I want to be working on right now is a JavaScript application that's for um, it's going to be called Dos Santos Apartments. It's going to be an apartment management platform where there's going to be an administrative side where the admins are able to go ahead and create their create apartments, create rooms to rent, check on if there are rooms to rent, cancel, update. There's a lot of things that administrators should be able to do, but there's also going to be the user side where a user going into the website should be able to go ahead, check out the apartments, check out all of the apartments under this apartment complex management company, as well as just check on each individual apartment, see what rooms are available, if they're open for rent, what time frames, etc., etc. So there's a lot of different things that I want to build into here. And first thing for today is I want to go ahead and first make the GitHub repo and kind of get everything started. So really excited to start doing this. I'm trying to go ahead and record everything so I can capture the entire process from beginning to end because I feel like it's a really fun idea and a good way to force me to continually explain the process of what am I thinking, what are my next steps, what's my final goal, what's my minimum viable product. A lot of these things I want to be as intentional as I can as I really try to work through my first real full application here. So yeah, really excited to go ahead and get started. First thing I'm going to do is make sure that everything is actually recording and streaming properly so I can find this later and take a look here. Okay, cool. It looks like I am live and just going to make sure that I can see myself as well as my screen. It looks like we are good to go. As you can see here, I'm following Tyler, really great guy. He's also looking for a job right now, so definitely check out his GitHub profile as well if you have any additional time. We both went to Full Stack Academy together, so we specialize in JavaScript. It looks like he's trying to dive into Ruby on Rails right now, as far as I can tell, but TY Monaghan at github.com. So my internet's a little bit slow to load up, but definitely feel to check him out. Great person to work with, spent in the education sector. Really amazing person to have around in the program. So first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I need to create this new repository for this new fake apartment complex called Dos Santos Apartments. And as I work through this, I'm going to be using a lot of examples, a lot of resources, and a lot of, well, one, a lot of Googling, and two, a lot of checking on what are people right now doing and seeing what assets I can take from them to really start to build things out. At the end of the day, I'm not a designer as much as I do love designing things. So I'm going to take the most use out of the resources that I have um, while still trying to code as much myself as I can as well. So let's go ahead and make this. It's going to be Dos Santos Apartments. And if there's anything that I learned from doing a boot camp and watching people program online, is that when you do it by yourself in your room, making typos and everything, not really a problem. But once you start doing it yourself in front of a camera, it's a completely different story. So I'm going to go ahead and create this new repository name. You can see I went ahead into this top right hand corner, click new repository, and this is all assuming you do have a GitHub account. Sign up is really easy. You can connect it to your Gmail if you have one of those. So um, make sure that you have a GitHub account, and then you're going to have this option to click on this plus button up here with a little drop down menu to create a new repository. So from there, we have these basic settings. We are okay with having this being a public repository, and a repository just being more of like an online storage file or folder that's going to contain all of the code that's going to make up this application. Let's leave it public. And in terms of what we want to initialize the repository with, we're going to go ahead and skip this step. You can see here, skip this step if you're importing an existing repository. So we're going to kind of be doing that. Let's go ahead and create this. We want to go ahead and now that we're making this repository, we're going to get some commands around 4 lines of code. what I'm going to go ahead and do is jump into my terminal here. Now I just need to decide where I want to actually make this file. Personally, I go into Documents and then I created a folder called Coding, pretty straightforward. And then I want to run these commands on it. So I'm doing a little bit of uh, uh, what's it called? Terminal, um, just terminal command. CD is going to be change directory, and I'm going to move to the file. I can hit tab in order to autocomplete. As you saw, I can go back, and then I can say doc tab, and it's going to go to doc for that, and then next is coding, and I can autocomplete it if it's unique. So now that I'm in the coding folder, I can go ahead and make a directory called Dos Santos Apartments. And that's right, I do have this already. I went ahead and want to create a fresh version. There's nothing really in there. This is kind of more of my basic Boilermaker um, that I was building out, but I want to go ahead and do all that on stream, um, which is the reason why I will go ahead and delete this. As you can tell, just really basic files, an app file, app folder, node modules folder, package.json, public folder, a readme, server.js, and a config file. So that's a very, very simple thing. We'll be building that out hopefully pretty shortly. For now, I'm going to go ahead and delete this and now recreate Maker Dos Santos Apartments. Perfect. So now if we go into here, we'll see that we have an empty directory. And now let's go ahead and change directories into that. And now we can go ahead and run these commands because we have a new repository that we've already made. Currently it's blank, but that is okay. So what we're going to see in these commands is we're going to see an echo of the README, which is saying, okay, go ahead and create this README inside of this folder. I'm not too familiar with echo personally, apologize. Um, I want to say that this is actually going to create the folder. So I don't want to do this. I just made the folder right now. What I can do is just to git init, which will say, oh, this looks like your computer can't handle Git, and let's go ahead and initialize a new project so that it can sync with everything else. And there's a couple presets you need to do. If you want to see that covered, there's plenty of other resources to do it. If you want me to personally explain it, reach out to me, let me know. I'll definitely happy to go over it with you. Next, we're going to see git add readme.md. So we're going to be adding a readme file, which needs to be created right here. So, maybe I'll go ahead and skip that step for now. Let's go ahead and just do git init for now. We'll create this empty repository, and we will need this kind of first commit. So let's go ahead and just say echo, touch readme.md. And this is more just syntax that I'm personally more familiar with. Touch is to create a new file. So if I go ahead and press enter right there. If I go into my Finder, I should be able to see a readme.md has been created, which is a markdown file, which is good for documentation that has a little bit more use than just like a txt file or something like that, which is really, really plain. You can't do very much styling on it. But in any case, so now we have accomplished pretty much the first 3 lines of these codes, or the first 2 lines here. Now we can go ahead and say git add readme.md, git add readme.md. And another thing that we could also say, which I'll see me use a lot, is git add period. And period means add all the files that are in this git folder. But because readme is the only file that we have, I won't need to do that at this time. Next thing I want to do is say git commit and add a message first commit. So this is the time where we want to always leave a message, hopefully as descriptive as possible, to let ourselves and others know what is it that I worked on and what did I change. So this is a problem that I had a lot when I first started working with GitHub. As you can tell right now, I'm still relatively new to it. I'm still learning to work through things, trying to figure out my best practices are going to be, but I want to build as good of a habit as I can. Each commit should be very specific and it should be a meaningful update in your code, even if that is updating, saying, oh, I updated my README to make it more accurate. Even that is fine, but generally you want to have one change equals one commit, because once you have 5 or 6 changes, trying to fit that into a single commit turns into a couple of lines. It doesn't look great, it's hard to follow, and we want to keep documentation as concise as possible. So in this case, we could say first commit, that'll do its job, but let's go ahead and say here readme added. So now if I press enter here, we're going to see that readme has been added and one file has changed, but there has been no insertions or deletions. That means there's no actual lines of code that has been changed. All we've added is a file, but not necessarily any lines inside of that file. So our README is now created. What we can now say is now we want to switch over to branch M main. So this line, I'm not 100% sure what this capital M necessarily does. It seems like it's going to move us to the main branch and also create it is what I want to say this doing. Is going to check for main and it's going to find or create it. So I'm going to press enter here and we should be able to say get branch and see that we are in the main branch. Perfect. Now we want to add a get, we want to say get remote add origin. Get remote add origin along with our SSH link, I believe it's called, this right here. What this is doing is it's saying, okay, now you want to be able to control this. In order to control something like a TV, you need a remote. You need to be able to interact with it. So now you're saying, okay, now let's have this remote called origin. And now our remote is named origin. So now we can say origin main, origin development, origin production. So this is going to say this is the remote you're using and this is the type of command or the type of branch that you want to interact with. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter here, and now what we did is inside of this folder say, okay, now we have permission to go ahead and interact with this GenYK226, which is my GitHub username, user / the name of the Git project that we're working in. Perfect. And now the very next line of code is we want to go ahead and push these changes, which means we want to go ahead and actually update this into online. So far, these commits is um, going to be like a version control system. We are controlling all of these changes. We want to have a log of each change that we've made in the project. So now we have these different versions that we're building inside of our local device. And it's important to remember Git and GitHub are two separate things. Git is a version control system, which is going to allow you to just manage this information. And GitHub is more of a storage place where you're able to go ahead and share code more easily, pull code from others, but it isn't necessarily what is maintaining the code itself. That's going to be on Git. So now that we have all our Git updated, which is going to be more of a base layer, this needs to be done. The next thing we want to go ahead and do is go ahead and push to origin main. And we can see here, this remote is what we did is add a github.com special command to say, okay, so git at github.com, here's where we want to put it. Now we're saying go ahead and push these changes that you've had onto this GitHub directory or location. So let's go ahead and do just that. Well, we can first go ahead and check and see, okay, we've committed it, but yeah, when we load it up, doesn't seem like any changes have been made. It's still saying, hey, go ahead and do your setup. So let's go ahead and run this command and run it properly. Git push u origin main. This -u, I can tell you what exactly that means, but let's go ahead and run this for the time being, and we're going to see this run. Perfect. It looks like there's nothing that went wrong. So now if we refresh this page one more time, we should be able to see the README come out once this refresh completes, and that should be the only file inside of our GitHub repository at this time. Perfect. And now we can also see our our comment right here, our message that we added from our commit that says readme added. Perfect. Very concise, easy to follow. That's just how I want it, and that's the practice that I want to follow as I go through this project. So as I make these updated, as I make these updates to the to Dos Santos Apartments repo, I'm expecting myself to do just that. If for some reason someone actually sees this live stream and notices it live, I hope that they let me know. Hey, it's been a while since you put a commit. But anyhow, enough of that. Let's go ahead and start actually building out this project. So as I mentioned, we really want this project to be an apartment complex management platform or an apartment management platform. Um, a little bit tricky to say, but I actually want to go ahead and take a look at the biggest reference that I'm thinking of. I know the one of the apartment complexes I used to live at was uh, they did a lot. They had a lot of apartment complexes under the main company. Set 320. This is actually one that my mother actually lived in for a short bit of time. Um, and I'm hoping that I can find this. Feel like I'm getting a little tongue-tied trying to explain kind of these pieces that don't really matter too much, but this right here, Sunset 320, is an apartment complex where you can see, you can check availability, you can apply, you can schedule a tour, you can do all these great things. But there's actually a company that most likely owns Sunset 320 as well as a lot of other apartment complexes. And I want to find out what that company is. So let's see, Bridge Property Management. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's not. But let's go ahead and do some research. Property Management. And if this isn't it, then I will also try checking a different location. So this isn't the company I was thinking of, but perfect. If this does manage a couple of other um, apartment complexes, then this will be another good reference for me to keep in mind. Perfect. So it looks like there are a couple different apartment complexes. We have this apartments tab, no drop down or anything like that. So hover only. Looks like we have a bit of a hover effect on here, change the color. So Bridge Property Management. Looks like they have two apartment complexes under their name. I don't see Sunset 320 under here, so I'm not sure if they got bought out and just hasn't changed over, or if there's just no available apartments. Not entirely sure, but let's see if I can find another one. Excuse me, I'm not used to talking this this much, especially without water. So next time I do this, I'm definitely going to have to bring some extra water with me. Let's see, the Ridge and Shores apartments. Excuse me. Ah, yes, Widener. So Widener, I would say, is one of the more well-known ones in Washington. Uh, they own a lot of properties. There's also another one on top of that that I wish I could find, but I don't quite recall the name. I've lived in a lot of different apartment complexes. Come from a pretty humble background. Um, but yeah, okay, perfect. So this is the type of platform that I'm looking for, that I'm looking to create. I want to be able to have some type of payment management. Um, if I could have a portion that is able to manage payments, that would be amazing. Um, the two main portions that I want to very much focus on is going to be this front end, um, interacting with individual apartments. So let's see what it looks like on the homepage of Widener. I'll take a step back. I think I got a little bit of tongue tied. I'm gonna need to get a lot more used to talking out loud. So this is the Widener homepage right here. We can see there's an apartments for rent, and oh, it looks like we also have it by state, so that's good to know. Um, Interesting processing requests. A little loading bar up there. Um, Let's see. Let's check out Washington, which is where I am. And I don't believe this is something I want to do for the time being. It seems like a bit too large of a scope that I want to tackle at this time. So I'm going to assume that I'm going to specialize in the state of Washington. And let's take a look here. Perfect. So now we're in Washington. We see some type of photo right here. It looks like it's just a PNG file. And we have a search bar right here where we could search something like the Ridge and Shores. And perfect. We have a little bit of a descriptor. We have different cities. And each of these are clickable. Okay. I'm not sure if I'm the biggest fan of this type of layout. I feel like um, something more of a list might be more suitable. More kind of like a newsletter style. Yep. I felt like I'd want to put more text on the front page just for each of these properties. Um, I'm not 100% sure I want to go about it, but this is going to be a really good reference. It looks like I have Widener apartment homes as well as bridge property management to reference at this time. So I do like the idea of how this is laid out. Not sure if I completely agree with the CSS styling and everything, but the idea is there. I will definitely use both of these as a reference as I create the website. Another thing that I'm hoping to do is I primarily work in React for the front end. I'm hoping to also do this in native, just pure JavaScript and HTML and CSS as well. So that's going to likely take a bit of extra time. This isn't like a do it in a week or a month project. This is definitely going to be more of like a long-term learning um, project that I'm going to be doing here. So it's going to be slow. It's going to be arduous. Hopefully, I'll be able to make some more condensed videos as time goes on that really just highlights the main portions of how to get from step A to step point A, point B, point C, all the way to more of a viable product at that point, and also expanding from there, trying to implement more APIs possibly. The world is ours. Coding is amazing because there's no end to the amount of things that you can do, which is part of the reason why it really excites me. So, alrighty, so I think that's enough looking at references. Now I want to actually start getting into writing some codes, but let's go ahead and create a bit of a um, little document here. So I'm in the middle of job applications. I'm sure there's going to be some job application tracker thing in here. Don't worry about it. What I want to focus on is upfront. What I did do is in my drive, which I should specify here, in my drive, I went ahead and created a Dos Santos Apartments folder, and I want that to hold a lot of my assets or any additional resources that are related to the project in here. That way, that way I just don't lose it, and anything that I need to personally reference is it'll hopefully be a lot of help. Just a really good thing to help keep me on track and on pace, and help me just sort through my thoughts so I'm not spinning my wheels too much. Yeah, I apologize for the slow internet. I am on a 2015, I believe it's 2015 MacBook, so it runs a little bit slowly. I love it though. I do enjoy coding on a Mac. I have my desktop right next to me as well, but if I can't code on my Mac, I definitely will. Unless I'm doing DSAs, data structures and algorithms, that I'll freely just do on my computer, but nothing in VS Code or anything like that. Perfect. So I have my MVP statements in tier list file here. This is something I got through my program, and then I took out as much as I could just to leave the bare bones structure of it. Um, and I can just continually add on to this document to really figure out what is Dos Santos Apartments, what's its focus, what am I building. Um, I didn't think through any of this. I wanted to make sure to be as genuine as possible of my thought process as I go through this. So I don't have too much listed here. As you can see, this MVP statement in tiers is a lot of tiers of how much should this project be doing at any given point. Tier 1 would be considered the MVP or minimum viable product, which is why we have an MVP statement, which will mostly be detailed in this beginning portion right here. So let's start to fill this out. Idea is going to be Dos Santos Apartments is an property management company that manages apartments. Users will be able to search different apartments owned by Dos Santos Apartments in the state of Washington. Also, very much apologize for the slowness of this. It's definitely really slow. Perfect. Hopefully there's not any typos over there. Um, let's see. Description, user stories, proof of concept, um, minimum viable product features, the tech stack, stretch goals. Alrighty, so this project is going to be pretty simple and likely more things will be added on as time passes. That's the hope. But for the time being, let's go ahead and add a couple things to the tech stack. I have a basic idea on how I want to structure this project. So let's go ahead and just add it right here. I don't like the dashes that much personally. I'm gonna go ahead and add a star or a bullet dot. Let's see. Basic. There's going to be JavaScript, of course. And within JavaScript, for the front end, we are going to be using React front end. And then for the back end, we are going to be using Express.js back end. And this next portion is going to be for the database itself. That will be through PostgreSQL or PSQL. SQL should all be capitalized, and database. So apologize, definitely very short list, but we'll leave it at that for now. Express.js and SQLize, I should say, for the back end. Alrighty. Perfect. So now my notes section, this is where I kind of want to go ahead and add in these URLs here. Or say notes slash references. All right. All right, so I'm going to just go ahead and leave those there. Now I don't have to lose track of those, which will be nice. And let's see. Let's begin actually adding into our repository now. I want to at least get a good start on the boiler, kind of like basic framework of this project. And I'm going to go into my Boilermaker code, and that's going to be my main reference for how I'm going to be building out the framework of this repository. Let's go and take a look here. When you first build out the project, there's a lot of different things you need to do, and having to do this enough times, I feel like it's really helpful to just have a nice README to help walk through each step one by one. I could technically just just clone this portion, but I like to walk through it still because I'm not 100% comfortable. Even though this is purely code that I wrote myself, I still like to go through it line by line to see if there's anything that I'm not misunderstanding, or if there's just something that I learned how to do better that I didn't recognize. So let's see. First step, don't expect to have a 1, 2, 3. Sure. Um, let's connect a new project to GitHub, create a new repo. Perfect, did that. And let's create a git ignore file before beginning to install npm packages. So let's create our gitignore file. This is going to just say what should GitHub completely ignore and what should we not share publicly. So let's go ahead and go into here. We are inside of Doceno's apartment. We just say code here, which is code dot. And let's go ahead and open this up. Give it a few seconds here. Alrighty. Perfect. There we go. Ignore. So the text editor I'm using is called VS Code. Seems like it's almost an industry standard. Obviously, when it comes to coding, you can change the text wherever you want. You can even use like a rich text editor, and you'll be able to get the job done. VS Code has the most resources and has the most tools. It's something I'd definitely recommend if you're looking to code. You might as well learn how to use VS Code now. If I find work at a company, maybe they'll use a different text editor, but my assumption is whatever company I go to is likely going to want me to know VS Code because of the tools and the resources it offers are just there's nothing comparable to it at this time. So we'll see if anything new comes out. For the time being, I would definitely recommend this if you're looking to get into coding and you wanted to first write your couple lines of code. Might as well get used to VS Code now. It's going to be easier, it's going to be faster, and it's going to feel a lot more intuitive the earlier you start. Perfect. So I went ahead and copy and texted this information in. So node modules, this is something that npm creates for you. Hopefully you know what npm is. If not, feel free to reach out to me. I can try to see if I can go over it with you, see if I can get a better understanding of it myself. But in any case, with any project on JavaScript, more than likely you'll have this node modules file that you want to not copy over because there's a lot of stuff in there. And our public bundle.js file, this is a compiled file that we're going to be seeing later. npm debug logs. We don't want to say for npm errors into GitHub. There's no point of that. And this is operating system for Mac users specifically, but we have this .ds_store file. Don't want to copy that over. env file. This is going to be like an environment file that we may or may not use. I don't see why we wouldn't use it eventually, but this is more prepping for the future because a lot of times this env file is going to hold a lot of sensitive information, and that is the last thing that we would ever want to be put publicly, which is risking our own security by forgetting to put this into our gitignore file. So add it early, that way we can't forget. Perfect. And now we want to use that npm thing that I just mentioned. Let's go ahead and say npm init -y, which is shorthand for yes, which skips the questionnaire altogether, which means you're creating a very basic project. Right now I'm going to hold function control tilde, and that should open up my terminal over here. And once this loads, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this in, just like we did git init. Now we're doing npm init. We're saying, okay, in this file, in this directory, let's go ahead and initialize just like the availability of npm tools inside of it, pretty much. So let's go ahead and wait for this to run. We're going to let this be an npm dependent project. I don't know how to say it. I don't know what the most proper way to say that is, but perfect. We have our package.json, which is primarily what we're looking for. As we install things, we're going to see this node modules file come out as well. So looks like I have another VS Code. I'm going to close out of that. And let's take a look. Let's see. Next up is to set up our compiler. So this Boilermaker template is being created with the intention of making a web page or application. If all the fancy JavaScript, um, all these other things, code you write doesn't get put onto the web page, then what's all this work for? Good question. So experience at best, but let's keep in mind the end user. That's a personal philosophy of mine. I feel like any code that you write should have the end user in mind. If it's not intuitive for them and it's easier for you, then most likely it's not the way they should be doing it. So this is a web page for others to interact with. So for them to do so, we're going to put this on the internet through the browser. In order for this to happen, in order for everyone to be able to access our beautiful, well-made future web page, we need to upload this to the internet, and they access that through the browser or through their phones, which will use a browser to still access the internet. So for this to happen, everything is going to be through HTML and the browser's JavaScript runtime environment. Yep, Chrome and all of these other applications, they have this JavaScript runtime environment that all of our code is running through. So there's a lot of copy and paste here, but the big takeaway is that Webpack is used to bundle all of what we have into a readable format into one single JavaScript file, which has 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, whatever lines of code that's needed in order to just render everything on a browser properly, and also just be compatible with a lot of different devices. We have Mac, we have Windows, we have older versions of Chrome, we have newer versions of Chrome. Not everything is supported, but we want to make it as accessible for as much people as possible. Now, furthermore, we're going to be using Babel and its extensive list of packages to make sure even an outdated browser is able to execute this code on older devices. Again, we want to make this as accessible as possible. Babel allows this to happen by converting your code into an older syntax as needed, just to ensure global just availability of your project. So just because someone can't afford the newest technologies does not mean that they should be deprived of the good we want to share with the public. If you don't write code that's good for the public, please don't post it. So the package JSON scripts should look familiar to most NPM node users. So once everything's set up, you should be able to run npm start to have your code run. That's not the case right now, but once everything's set up, that's what we're hoping for. This npm start command will hopefully we just need to run that command and our server will be running. So let's go ahead and start making steps to making that happen. Now, there's a lot of things here. We want to save this in our little developer tools type of thing because all of these are related to more kind of like the development environment to get this working. So let's go ahead and copy and paste this in. I don't want to run through every single line, but let's take a quick look. So we're saying we're saving these in the development section of npm, I guess. Um, Whereas our production doesn't necessarily have to have these files because it's going to be deployed to a website. So we have Webpack. Webpack is going to be what bundles everything together. We have Webpack Dev Server. That's going to be just a server that Webpack can host on. NodeMon, that's going to be a server. NodeMon is going to let us serve our back end, is how I understand it. And now we have a lot of these Babel things. We talk about Babel. We want to make sure that this is available for everyone. Perfect. Now we have a style loader and CSS loader. Honestly, I want to say that's more for some type of like special CSS, just to help manage that. I'm actually going to take that out for the time being. I don't feel like I really need that right now. And we have another Babel with another preset, and it looks like we have NodeMon in here twice. So I'm going to need to fix this README afterwards. So let's go ahead and save this. I wish my computer were running faster, but I think this MacBook just can't handle streaming, and yeah, it can't handle me both streaming and and just coding at the same time. So um, more than likely, I feel like maybe I'll mostly make this project on my Windows computer. It just has more processing power, so that might be what I end up doing. But in any case, for now, let's go ahead and while all this stuff installs, I want to go ahead and change into my boilerplate. and it's my version 2. The first time I made it, it was my first time. I recreated I recreated the boilerplate a lot of times. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I started to get lost and I didn't do enough commits. It was just getting really messy. Ended up having to scrap it and restart this version 2. But as you can tell, there's still plenty of mistakes that I have here to fix. Um, Probably some of these things this adding in NodeMon twice, that was definitely something I added in the past, within the last month, for sure. So that was a mistake by me. So I'll make sure to go ahead and get that corrected. So now we'll go ahead and wait for this to load. While we wait for it to load, I'm just going to continue taking a look through this file a little bit more. After we run this npm install, what we're going to expect to see is this. I don't know exactly if this package lock there's a typo here as well, packaged lock.json file. I'm not sure if that happens after we try running npm, um, like saying npm run some command, or if it's just there as soon as we install anything. So I guess we'll find out. But this node module files will also show up in our repository, which is going to hold all of the different npm packages, I believe. Um, Even if they're not completely installed, but it'll give us access to all those npm packages that we know and love today. And then from there, we're gonna have to make a couple additional changes. Let's check on progress. So this is still installing, and let's see. I did not begin opening up the boilerplate. Let's create this extra file. Let me put on a bit of capstick actually. Alrighty, so inside of our README, near the top, this progress now. Looks like this is almost finished. That's good. Okay, I think like it's going to be line 55 here. Looks like word wrapping is not on for whatever reason. Oh, this can line 57. That's all of it right there. So now I want to take out the second nodemon. I believe for some reason I ran the install and it said that I didn't have nodemon, so in any case, let's go ahead and take these out. And the next portion that we need to do is actually update our webpack config. I wonder if I have to change this as well since I'm taking out this the CSS loaders and everything. Perfect. So this portion, I do not need this. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this entirely. And I don't believe that should cause any issues. Right now it's just in the README, so if I run into any troubles, I will find out in a bit. And as I mentioned, git add a period, git status to check. We're going to see, perfect, the README is updated, no other changes. Git commit, and then leave a message. README updated, CSS loader removed. And there was also one additional typo. A little bit higher. Package JSON. Perfect. And this is a good reminder. Once you hit commit, that's when something is actually going to be saved. Don't save things unless you finish making your changes to whatever file that you're in. So now I'm going to reset. Now if I check git status, it should be in red because now the last committed change that I made, or the ads that I've made, like don't include all of the files right now. And we can see here is a little orange M right here, which is saying, hey, it looks like you modified this since the last time you added it. So okay, no problem. We'll say git add again. We'll update it, git status. Perfect, we're green again. Now, if I commit now, I know that there's no discrepancy between um, what I'm pushing to what I'm committing and what I see on my screen. So git commit m updated readme, um, removed CSS loader. I believe there's some other CSS thing that I removed, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. So now I'll just say git push origin main. And in terms of how we want to go ahead and set up this pushing to origin main directly, that's not the greatest thing. That's not really what we want to see. There's a way to control that, and I'm going to go ahead and add that later, but only after we have all these the 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 framework of this project all set up. Once all that is done and we start adding in more personalized code for this project, that's when we're going to go ahead and really build out a couple more branches to make sure we have a really nicely organized project to make sure that we're not completely breaking the code somewhere um, before um, before deploying it or updating our deployed version. Alrighty. So my GitHub or my boilerplate is updated, and in this as well, I will just go ahead and refresh this here. Alrighty, now I can see the package lock is now fixed, so I know the changes have been complete. Now what do I want to do? I ran the installs, and now I need to create or edit some files. Package JSON, update main from main index.js to main server.js. Okay, I can do that. So right now, inside of our package JSON file, we're going to see that this main index.js, what we're going to see inside of our scripts is going to be saying something like main. What this is saying is what main is equal to is server.js. That way we can just write a bit more concise codes, especially in our scripts. Next we have our webpack config. Let's go ahead and update scripts, copy and paste the below code. Okay, perfect. Let's not go too much out of order. Let's just take it one line at a time, reference whatever we need to. Update the scripts. Can do. Where are our scripts? Here we are. Let's go ahead and paste that in. Add a comma. Is a JSON file, so we have a specific syntax we need to file. It's a lot less forgiving than JavaScript is, for better or for worse. And now, cool, now we have a couple of commands. We have our start server, which runs nodemon main.js, which we can see here is actually server.js. And we're saying the environment is going to be in HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, and we're going to ignore the public folder. So that makes sense because nodemon is going to be running our backend, and public is going to be related to our front end. Understood. Now we have build and build watch, and what this is going to do is run webpack. And in terms of running webpack, webpack is going to create this bundle.js file that I talked about earlier, which is primarily our front end. This build watch thing is very nice because every single time we save, it will automatically update the deployed. It'll automatically update the bundle.js as soon as we save. That way, we'll see the changes on wherever we're hosting the server. So I know that I want to make this as thorough as possible, but I'm also leaving a lot of information out. Definitely feel free to reach out. There's so many layers of things that can be covered that there's no way for me to really cover it all while actually progressing through this project, which I feel like progressing slow enough as is. So it may become more streamlined as time goes on. But if there's any questions about something that I didn't thoroughly explain, I might not even fully understand it, but I'm hoping that you ask me so we can figure it out together, and that way we can both have a try to figure out what's actually going on in the code um, at a deeper level. Alrighty, so with that tangent, we have updated our scripts. We have our build watch, which is going to be running Webpack and updating it as it's being watched. And now we have npm run start, which we can run, which will say, or we can say npm start to say npm run build watch and npm run start server. So this and right here, this is very specific towards Mac computers. I'm not going to be able to do this on my Windows computer. I'm just going to have to open up two separate terminals and run them both separately. That's just something to keep in mind for Windows users. There are some different complications, which is one of the reasons why I don't want to shift over. But as you can see, everything is running really slowly. I may just have to make the switch, especially if I go ahead and check this live stream and the quality just isn't there. So we'll see how everything goes in as I continue to do this. In any case, I think I'm good to go from there. Next is going to be my webpack config.js file, which I have to create. Create the file. I will do that. Let's see. VS Code. Now I'm going to go ahead and right click in the bottom of this empty area, add a new file, and I'm going to name this webpack config.js. And we can tell this webpack config file has its own separate icon here, which is nice, so I know I didn't do anything wrong there. And now I'm going to copy and paste this webpack config.js file thing. So you can tell I already made a couple of changes. This should be updated to fit your needs. But I can't 100% say that I completely understand it or I just copy and pasted literally everything. Neither of them are true. So let's just go ahead and run through this and try to see if we can get a basic understanding of what's going on here. So at the top, we can see here, I believe this is like ES5 syntax. It's definitely not ES6, so it's an older syntax that it should be able to be used anywhere. It's not some type of like import, export, this type of thing. Const path equals require path. So path is a built-in library that we are accessing in order to go ahead and create like a directory URL. So if we say like, oh, in this project, it's like / dot get ignore, that would direct to this file, and / node underscore modules would direct into this file folder. Similar how we did that change directory cd, like documents coding. It's all the same thing. This path require up here just allows us to use that inside of our code, inside of our Webpack. Now we're going to see the entry point of our app. So now we're saying, okay, um, as we access this file, what we're going to do is we're actually going to run through this Babel polyfill first, and then this app.js. So you can tell this is saying, okay, wherever we're at right here in the main directory, it's inside of a folder called app, and then inside of that we have an app.js file. That's going to be really important because as we can see, that's not created yet, but we need it inside of our file. So hopefully we'll be creating that before I end the live stream today. Um, Explaining everything really takes longer than I initially expected as well. I'm having a good time though, so I'm glad I'm doing this, but hopefully we'll be able to create that file and get a little bit further before I end the live stream today. So now in terms of the output, now we know where the information is coming in from, and it's running through this Babel. I don't really understand, I don't really know if the order of this completely matters, but I assume it does, where it's going, eh, actually, I don't. I'll take back that statement. I don't know if it matters, but all I know is that one of these arguments is going to Babel prefill because we just want to make this as accessible as possible. Anything that has Babel on it, I'm assuming that just means, um, yes, this will make more people be able to use our code. Perfect. I love that. And now our actual entry point is going to be this specific file um, that we specify right here. Now our output here, where is our bundled code actually going? So our path is going to be set equal to underscore underscore dir name. Um, I believe this is going to be the directory name inside of what package JSON, which if we check inside of here, let's scroll up, it's going to be Dos Santos hyphen apartments. I believe that's what the dir name is going to be referring to. If anyone knows that I'm wrong, please correct me. And now we have a dev tool a source map. This is more on just like how is this going to be rendered. There can be a couple problems that happen because of this dev tool. So you don't necessarily need this code, but you may get some warning messages inside of your Chrome console or something like that if you don't have it. So just something to keep in mind. If there's some random warnings that are getting through Chrome, try running it in incognito mode, see if that makes it go away. I have some type of React Chrome application thing right here, which causes some warning messages sometimes. So that's just another thing to keep out for. In terms of the mode, we're in development mode. We are not in production. We're not in the production phase where we're deploying this app to somewhere. So we're in the development process. I don't know if there's another option that I should be doing this for like pre-development, but definitely not in production. So I'm going to leave it as development. So now I'm going to say, let's go ahead and I'm resolving JS and JSX files. JSX files, this is very React specific. It can be used in things like React Native and other things as well. But in any case, JSX is HTML like JavaScript counterpart that allows you to do a lot of these really cool things that are very HTML like inside of JavaScript. As far as I'll get into it, I apologize. It's definitely very messy, but we'll definitely see it more in action as we get into the front end code. But we are very far from that right now. We have a lot of setup to do. Next, modules. So now modules is going to be this object of different like rules and all these things that kind of dictate more how is everything going to be processed. So we can see here, hey, like if you, so go ahead and find out. We have this JavaScript, JSX file, and so this is going to be a regex or reject syntax. So what I'm seeing here is this dollar sign at the very end of this forward slash pair. It means that this is going to be at the end. This question mark means it doesn't necessarily need this X or not. So we're either looking for JavaScript files or JSX files. So I never really fully analyzed that, but that's what I'm seeing. Hopefully that's agreeable to everyone. And now what we're going to say is now we're going to go ahead and include this as like a path.resolve. So now it's going to be the dir name forward slash app. So is this dir name just a current directory? Maybe. But either way, it looks like we're just including or just checking all the JavaScript or JSX files inside of the app folder. And the loader is going to be a Babel loader. Babel loader is going to go ahead and just standardize it across languages. This dev server, stats, chunks, false. This is just going to give me less things in my terminal, in my backend terminal, because it can get very messy if I don't have this chunks false line right here. So this is something that I added in as well, just to make, just to simplify what I see on my end a little bit more. Um, Maybe there's a reason why people may not do this, not too sure, but as of now it's working for me. If I run into any problems, then that's something I'll try to keep in mind, that I'm taking away some extra data that I could be looking at by running this code at the bottom. So that's something I'll try to keep in mind. Now I'll go ahead and save that. All of that makes sense to me. It looks good. Next thing that I want to look at is Babel RC. So this Babel RC file, I just want to create and add it. It's just going to give some presets on how it wants everything processed. We did npm install on a lot of things, and this uses some of those lots of things. So Babel RC, you can see got a special B logo here because it's Babel related. I can just go ahead and save this and continue on my merry way. So it looks like I have a change in my package.json file. Gonna assume that's when I added in the scripts and I haven't saved since then, so I'll go ahead and save that. If we want to run into any problems, we'll double check the lines and see what's going on. So now that you've done that, if you review webpack config.js, it'll explain the overall flow of our application. Entry, get the data from app.js. Output, output the data to the public folder. And fancy things to allow for fancy features to work and simplify our workspace. Cool. So now that we know that, there's an obvious problem. We don't have the file structure to support this. Cool, let's go ahead and make this. Alrighty, so let's just run through it line by line. Let's not get too antsy. Server.js. Perfect, let's go ahead and do it. Let's make a file called server.js. And this server.js file is going to be the output source of the back end of our code. Cool. Next, the app folder. So this is going to be where a lot of our React information is going to be held in, and it's also going to be the source of output for our bundler for our Webpack. So this is going to be a lot of the actual JavaScript work that we need done to be layered with our HTML to really make this interactive website. And I should also ask, this is a single page application. Single page application is going to be a website where you don't need to do these constant refreshes. The fewer refreshes, the better, the more seamless the experience. One of the ways that we make that possible is by making these API calls or just any other calls that we need to make through something called Axios, which can be done asynchronously, where a typical fetch request will generally require um, a refresh. Maybe that's outdated information. Please correct me if I'm wrong, as always. But let's go ahead and continue to build this project out. Perfect, so I'm going to create an app folder right here, and inside that app folder, I need to create app.js, which is our compiler, and that's going to be the destination that we saw. Um, let's see, app.js. This is the directory. This is the input or the entry point that we specified in our webpack config.js. So this is going to be a really important file. This is our compiler file, where everything in this file should be pulling from everything else inside of app.js, most likely. Maybe there's a few exceptions, but either way, this is the connection piece between all of the work that we do and what reaches the actual browser at the end of the day, which is going to be our bundle.js file. So very, very, very important file that we have right here. And the other folder that we need is going to be the public folder, which is going to be where our bundler is going to be saved. Perfect. Now, there's just some additional explanation. I'll go ahead and so this is called boilerplate Jin v2. Feel free to go ahead and check out my GitHub at JINYK226 if you ever want to look at this boilerplate text to kind of go through this information a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down, and as far as I can see, this is what our file structure should look like at this time, and we should have the basic our bundler set up so that we can actually start coding and create an application that's meant for the web. Let's take a quick gander. We have Babel RC, perfect. We have git ignore, perfect. Package JSON, package lock JSON. Excuse me. All good. So it looks like when we run some npm installs, package lock JSON also appears. Server.js, good. App folder, yes, with app.js inside of it, yes. Public folder, yes. And now node modules folder, yes. And a lot of things that we don't want to save inside of our inside of our GitHub. No point in doing that. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and say git add. Also make sure that we don't have any additional saves that we need to do real quickly. Perfect. I'm gonna start. Okay, so now we have our git add, git status, all should be green. Perfect. Git commit m basic bundler. Okay. Instead of saying basic bundler configured setup, git push origin main. Again, we should generally try to avoid pushing to origin main, but because we're at the very, very beginning of the project, I'm going to say it's okay just to make it more concise. Right now, we don't need a bunch of these branches to kind of go through and work through. Either way, we're simplifying the process for now. We'll make it into a more fleshed out project at another day. Alrighty. So I do want to see a little bit of code. I'm going to go through this backend process a little bit faster. But let's go ahead and get this done so that we can actually see something in Chrome before I head off for the night. Let's run these installs, create these folders. So I need a server folder. server folder. Oh, getting to that time, isn't it? Now inside of here, I also want to create an index.js as well as an API folder. Now I'm going to actually add in this index.js file first because I noticed if I just add a folder inside of a folder, the way VS Code reads it is a bit strange. So I'm going to go ahead and just make the file first and then the folder. I don't like making two folders inside of each other without a folder also to accompany it. Seems pointless, seems unnecessary, but in any case, that is what I found to be the easier option. Feel free to not take my word on it and play around with it, and maybe you can teach me something new as well. All right, so let's go ahead and update this index.js file. So now we can